last. I feel like I'm at a rock concert. And of course, I am. My name is Tina Srebotnjak. I look after programming here at the library. I am, of course, thrilled to bring today to the A-list, which is our Canadian authors list, two of the most beloved and, dare we say, craggy faces from the CBC. You'll have to figure out who that was directed at. Rex Murphy and Peter Mansbridge, of course. I want to mention that the A-list author series, of which this is part, is our Canadian author series that brings writers to branches across the city. And we're very happy today, of course, to have these two stars with us. This room that you're in is the Bram Bluma Appel Salon, which is new to us this fall, and as you see, has a large capacity, but obviously not large enough for these two. Thank you so much for coming out, and please bear with us if you're standing at the back. I'll just give you a bit of the lay of the land. So I'm going to have a conversation with Rex and Peter, then I will just line up the microphone for question and answer. There's a bookseller somewhere hidden at the back. Nicholas Four is here with us. And Peter and Rex will both be signing books afterwards. So let me introduce these people as if they need it. Peter Mansbridge, of course, is the anchor of the National, chief correspondent of CBC News. He's won 12 Geminis, and just a few days ago was made an officer of the Order of Canada. And just this morning, I opened up the paper and see that he's also Chancellor of Mount Allison University. The news show isn't giving him enough work, obviously. He also, of course, is the host of Mansbridge One-on-One, and that has run on formerly News World, now CBC News Network for many years. 101 is also the title of his book. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
And Rex Murphy is Rex Murphy. He was born in Newfoundland, which I think is a very informative comment. And you won't be surprised to hear was a child prodigy. Went to university at the age of 15. He hosts cross-country checkup and appears regularly, of course, on the National with Peter doing Point of View. He also writes a column for the Globe and Mail, and his book is called Canada and Other Matters of Opinion. Welcome, Rex. Peter, one of the first stories you tell in your book, which is my favorite story, is your discovery in Churchill. The discovery, well, tell the story. It's such a great story.
Yeah, tell the story.
Let's just say I was not a child prodigy. I dropped out of high school. I'd been in the Navy for a couple of years, and that hadn't worked out very well. And then I ended up working for a small airline in Manitoba, northwestern Ontario, Saskatchewan, called Transair. And they sent me up to Churchill, Manitoba, where I was working one day doing everything from fueling aircraft to loading bags, you name it. When the ticket agents asked me to announce the flight for them over the PA system in the terminal building, which I did. I went up boldly to the microphone, said Transair, flight 106 for Thompson, Nepal, and Churchill, or in Winnipeg, is now ready for boarding at gate 1. We only had one gate, but it sounded right. And lo and behold, there was this fella in the terminal building. He came right up to me and he said, "You've got a really good voice. Have you ever thought of being in radio?" And I said, "Well, no, as a matter of fact, I hadn't." And he said, "I'm the manager of the station here in Churchill, a little CBC Northern Service station, and we have a vacancy for the late night shift." And I said, "You're kidding." Because I had never ever thought about broadcasting or what it eventually became for me, journalism. And he said, "No, I'm serious. We've got to fill that position." And I started the next night. And that was September of 1968, and I've been with the CBC ever since.
Isn't that a great story? I love it. Now, Rex, the question on everyone's lips. Did you, as a child, read the dictionary cover to cover? Where did you get your magnificent vocabulary?
Well, let me get to that in just a small second. I just want to point out, having heard that story for the very first time, that CBC in the old days, in the 60s, had a much superior method of audition than they do today. And I also want you to know, I'm here under more strain than he is. I'm essentially the tail and he's the kite. And to get ready for today, I read I like reading the Bible to myself occasionally. The Gospel of John. I am not myself the light, but I've come to bear witness to the light. But
We have to put up with this every day.
That's why he gets Order of Canada medals.
Yes, exactly. But
To go back to your question, give you half a serious answer because that's as much as I can ever muster. My father was obviously born a long while before I was. At least if the metaphysics are right. But he grew up in Newfoundland in the 30s, before Confederation, and all of those things. And in his particular case, it meant, this is pretty standard in Newfoundland, he had grade 3. My mother had a much more fortunate circumstance. She was the oldest of 10 daughters. But when she reached grade 10, because by then the youngest one was coming along, she had to step out of school. But Marie, we always first named each other. Marie did have grade 10 in the early 20s, which was pretty good in Newfoundland. Harry had grade 3, and as I grew older, and only actually when you got to middle life did I realize one of the great dynamics in his life, and it was a contagion with me. He wasn't bitter, but he really did know, and we're in a library, so it's a good place to say this. He really did know in a way that a lot of us, because we're in more prosperous times, we take it so casual and for granted. He knew what he'd missed. He didn't have school of any form or kind whatsoever. And when in about his early 30s, he got a job at the Argentine Naval Base and started meeting some of the Americans coming in, some of them, by the way, immensely sophisticated. I think over the years, it grew on him more and more and more. He was a smart man, but he missed school, but he had that kind of reverence for books and education that in some cases only people who A, haven't had the chance to get it themselves, carry to such fervor. And secondly, he was naturally, I'm having an Oprah spasm now, I'm sharing with you.
and of course, he loves Oprah.
And even as I was a kid, Harry would come home from the base and he knew the guy who drew up the rules of protocol, and he'd have a new word. And he would always play this kind of game. And I think by proxy, what was in him frustrated or amputated in terms of what he thought he could have been, and as I said, it was without bitterness, but he knew that he had missed something very great. And so I think by a benign contagion, he forced a fairly strong desire to acquaint oneself with these things. So if there is any spread to the lingo that I use, it's basically because Harry was deprived of his.
Now you said you first named your parents. You called them Harry and
We all
Marie?
first did, yeah. That's the way it was from the age of 3.
Wow. Huh. Now, Peter, in Peter's book, one of the people that he interviews is actually Rex. And
It's the high point of the book.
It is. Oh, I buried the lead. Sorry. But on this vocabulary question, Peter, I gather that Rex out in public, at least at your lunches, has quite the vocabulary as well.
He does.
Is it
you
a
think it's
color?
good on, yeah, you think it's good on the air. You kind of got to keep your head down when you're when we have lunch, which we do quite often, and they're wonderful lunches. I'm always looking around to see who's close by, because Rex isn't shy about his feelings and his thoughts, and expressing them in a way that people not just at the table you're sitting at can hear.